You're with the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for staying with us. For Northeast Ohio gardeners, the planting season often begins after the last frost, which in Cleveland is expected to be tomorrow, April 14th. That's according to the Old Farmer's Almanac. And the Ohio Farm Bureau reports that cool weather crops like asparagus, cabbage, kale, spinach, and radishes are already in season. As more people dig into gardening, many are looking at ways to make their yards more sustainable. Some are doing that by embracing native plants, which are adapted to local conditions and typically require less water and maintenance, which sounds very good to someone like me who doesn't know a thing about gardening. Now, these native plants also support pollinators, birds, and other wildlife. Today, we are talking about how to get your garden started and how to get the most out of it this season. And with me in studio, I have people who know much more about gardening than I do. We have Kim Lessman with us, manager of the Holden Seed Bank at Holden Arboretum. Kim, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Also with us in studio, we have Dave Tomaszewski. He's the co-owner of Meadow City Native Plant Nursery. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. I'm happy to be here.
And with us by phone, we have Catherine Frey, Master Gardener at the Ohio State University Extension in Medina County. Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
And we know we've got some green thumbs in our audience. We want you in on this conversation, so please give us a call. That number to do that is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Kim, Northeast Ohio springs can have big temperature swings, and I wonder about the status of the gardens at this point. Do you think the last frost will be tomorrow? What are we expecting?
Great question. I think a good rule of thumb for the last frost in our region is usually about mid-May. So I usually look toward May 15th, but if all signs are pointing that it is a little bit of a warmer spring, you can kind of start getting activated in your space as early as May 1st. That being said, I was poking around in my own garden just this past weekend.
Okay, so you were getting some things ready, maybe thinking about some stuff out there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So would this be, in your opinion, a warmer spring, or are we looking at a cooler spring? You think we may be earlier than mid-May, later? Just a guess if you had to.
If I just had to give an intuitive guess, I would say we're right on track thus far.
Okay.
It doesn't feel like it's too warm of a spring. I think we're having that rainy weather that we all know and love in Ohio, those cooler temperatures. So yeah, I'd say we were right on track for an average spring, but I am not an expert in that, so don't quote me.
Okay, all right. Dave, can you talk about leaf cover and debris that might be sitting on gardening beds right now? Should people clean up the beds, or should we leave the leaves alone? I have seen this sort of kind of social media campaign to leave the leaves.
Yeah, so I would say just generally, leaving the leaves is super important for all kinds of beneficial insects and pollinators. The immature stages of these organisms generally take place on or near the ground layer. So like right there, in the shallow soil or in the fallen leaves themselves. So you don't want to have like if you're gardening to support wildlife, which is something I would strongly encourage everyone to do, you don't want to have a garden that's devoid of fallen leaves. Having said, so you want to have some fallen leaves there basically throughout the entire year, throughout the growing season, and leave those undisturbed. Now there is a caveat, and that is if the fallen leaves are too deep, that could interfere with the growth of your plants. So I'm talking about just enough fallen leaves so that you don't see the surface of the ground. And, that's enough. If you see that get depleted, then I would add more. But you don't want to, you don't want to take away from that shallow fallen leaf layer, because that could negatively impact all those bugs and other critters that we're trying to help and that really need us.
Well, I'm happy to say that we are doing our part by leaving the leaves in Lakewood. So I didn't know we were doing that, but happy that we are. Catherine, what crops can you put in the ground right now, if any, while we're still kind of experiencing some pretty cold nights?
Well, there are some things you can do, like if it's not too wet, things like onion sets. You can sow lettuces, cool season crops like spinach, and there are different various cold crops, but you still have to watch if there's a frost. If you have transplants, you'd have to cover them. But it even is hard. It's still a little early even for some of the transplants.
Okay.
But you wouldn't want to do anything like, tomatoes or eggplants or green beans or anything like that. But the best thing you can do is just maybe clean and get things prepped up to plant this time of year.
Okay. If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we're talking about gardening. We're talking about when is the right time to start putting things in the ground and how you can get the most out of your garden this season. We've already got some emails that we'll be getting to. If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can call us. That number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a note on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. We have one emailer in who has asked, Antonio is asking about native plants. And Kim, I'll ask you this question. Antonio wants to know, what actions would you like to see municipalities in Northeast Ohio taking to support normalizing native plants?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking it. I would love to see a world in which our city government agencies are supporting native plant restoration in some capacity, whether that is supporting pollinator habitat corridors in these urban spaces or supporting the urban forest canopy with native trees or other native understory plants. I would love to see a world in which they are full support of putting those plants in these spaces.
We do have a note in here from Donna. Donna says there'll be a native plant sale in Medina County hosted by the Sewer and Water Conservation District. So letting people know about that. That's something you can check out apparently the weekend of May 15th, 16th, and 17th. That's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So Donna, thanks for letting us know about that. Kim, I want to ask you, before people even think about planting, what should they be thinking about in terms of their soil? Should we be testing it?
Well, I guess that depends entirely on what you're growing. I know that Catherine just spoke about planting vegetables and other food crops. And so in that regard, I would say that you would want to be testing your soil to make sure that there is enough organic matter to support the food crops that you're growing, as well as making sure that pH is exactly where you want it to support healthy growth. If you are focusing on native plants, however, I think our native soils should be where the native plants want them to be. Because these plants have naturally evolved over time to be in this space, our soils should be fully equipped to give them what they need.
Okay. We have an email from Marjorie in South Euclid, and is excited that we're doing the show. Thank you very much, Marjorie. We appreciate that. Marjorie is asking if there are any recommendations about organic fertilizers or treatments. Dave, I want to get your thoughts on fertilizers. She says she wants to protect birds, pollinators, and insects by eliminating chemical fertilizers, but doesn't see great reviews on organic products that are available. So, Dave, what do you think about fertilizers and what people can do there?
Yeah, I think like Kim was saying, I think a lot of our, if you have a native garden, like a native pollinator garden or something like that, usually you don't need to add fertilizers to these spaces in order for those plants to thrive. And if you do, there could be the unfortunate outcome of your plants, getting taller than they would normally, and then they can't support their own mass and they topple over, which isn't a great look. Also, sometimes too much fertility in the soil can support like weed growth, and you could have like undesirable, weeds kind of like competing for the same space as your plants. So I think that really focusing on organic matter is a great way to ensure that your soil is going to have, the necessary nutrient levels for your native plants. These are plants, of course, that are growing in natural areas around the state, and those natural areas have soils that are very rich in organic matter. So I would say simply putting a ground cover of, either leaf mulch or wood mulch, or maybe putting some kind of like a compost down early in the establishment of your garden. That should be enough to get it off on the right foot. But in a lot of cases, if your yard can grow grass and trees, then it's going to have enough nutrients to grow these native plants that you want in your pollinator garden, and you probably don't have to add any nutrients.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. If the grass is growing, seems like other things should too.
Yep.
Catherine, what are you growing? Do you grow native plants, or what are you putting in your garden this year?
Oh gosh, I'm a fanatic on native plants. I have mostly converted all of my garden beds to natives. I do have some traditional plants that are not native, but what you have to make sure is that none of the plants in your garden are invasive. And the state of Ohio Department of Agriculture has a list on the ones that have been banned, but there are actually very many others that tend to be invasive. So that would be my first clue, is get rid of those. But I also have a lot of traditional perennials like hostas and, hydrangeas. I really love those plants, but they stay in their place. And the other thing I do a lot of vegetable gardening, but it is a bit early, like I said before. You can maybe seed some lettuces, but other than that, my garden's empty. I do have some garlic, which I planted in the fall, which is all up in green right now, and that's a good idea to give that a little bit of fertilizer. But and I have an asparagus patch that's trying to grow with some of the warmer days. Those are coming up. But otherwise, my vegetable garden's pretty bare. But my perennials are starting to show some life, as long as with my trees and shrubs. But that's basically what I do. I also do some container gardening, which I haven't started yet because it's way too early for that, because that's mainly annual type plants. But that's about it right now. Of course, the lawn is growing like crazy, but I'm not real big on the lawn. The lawn just gets mowed and that's it. So,
Catherine, I want to ask you, you mentioned invasives to watch out for. What are some common ones that people can watch out for that you might not want in your gardening space?
gosh, the common one you might find in your yard would be something like, showing up in your shrub beds, could be multiflora rose. There's buckthorn. There's autumn olive. A big one is Callery pear. If you still have a Callery pear in your yard, I would suggest replacing it with a native tree. And I know those were pushed back about 20 years ago. Those first came out, but they have proven to be just terrible trees. And it seems like any neighborhood you go through, those are in bloom right now, and they are everywhere. But in your, they're in most city lots, smaller lots, it's not hard to get rid of your invasives. You should be able to just dig things out that you see coming up. But the main thing is you have to know how to recognize these plants. So that's why I would recommend getting that list from the Department of Agriculture. It is online. And there's also a noxious weed list you might want to look at too. But yeah, you don't know. It depends on where you live, what can show up in your yard. There's all kinds of other things, like lesser celandine is in bloom right now. That might show up. That looks a lot like our native marsh marigold. So you just have to call the extension office, your local extension office. And if you have a plant that you're not sure what it is and you didn't plant it, you can take a photograph of it or bring it in, and we can at least identify it for you.
I got to
And
follow
tell
up.
you how to get rid of it.
I've got a follow up for you, Catherine. As somebody whose thumbs are the opposite color of green, I got to look on the color wheel and see what that is. But the opposite color, just completely fluorescent in that direction. What's the problem with invasive plants? You mentioned these trees that were pushed 20 years ago and how they've proved to be a problem. Why do the invasives need to go?
Well, they completely disrupt our ecosystem. The ones that invade, especially into our parks and our public spaces, and even into your home garden, or if you have a larger area. I have a few acres. I have problems with everything moving in. They are actually taking up the place where a native plant could be, and these non-native invasives do not support the local wildlife, the insects, the animals that need the birds, that need our native plants to survive, whether that plant is providing food or shelter, or in the case, I know everybody knows about monarchs, but that example is used for a reason, because it's so vital. It really shows the story. The only plant that a monarch butterfly can reproduce on is milkweed. And it doesn't matter which milkweed it is, as long as it's a milkweed that grows here in Ohio. Their larvae cannot survive without milkweed. They lay their eggs on that plant and only that plant. And those caterpillars, if they don't have milkweed, they never become butterflies. So that is just one example, but there are all of our native animals and insects rely on a native plant for its survival. So if you have these invasives overtaking, especially I'm also a volunteer for the Medina County Parks, and we have a plant called garlic mustard, for one. There are many other invasives in these parks as well. And that plant will typically just create a monoculture. So all our spring ephemerals are being overrun by one plant that no animal, even the deer don't eat this plant, can't survive on. So we're trying to just eradicate it as best as we can so that our native plants can thrive and support the local ecosystems.
Thanks for breaking that down for us, Catherine. I appreciate it. We have a call now from Jennifer in Hudson. Jennifer, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Hi, I just had a follow-up on some of the organic products that you were discussing. I have been a garden designer and landscape contractor for about 35 years, just retired. And I was always looking for a way to steer my clients into non-chemical, versions of pest control and fertilization. And I know one of your callers was asking what they can do. And am I allowed to tell you a company that I procure products from, or no?
Please share, Jennifer. We'd love to hear your perspective and
Sure.
experience.
Okay. I go to Ohio Earth Foods. It's down in Uniontown, and they are an all-organic lawn and plant company. For my lawn care, for a pre-emergent fertilizer that you can put on right now, and it goes in a spreader. It's just a granular. I use corn gluten, and I've used this for years, and it's non-invasive. It would be the equivalent to preen, and on the lawn, it is really high in nitrogen. But the good thing about this product is it's safe for your environment, as well as it hits the weed germination phase in your lawn. So obviously you wouldn't want to put it where you're putting new seed, but you can spread this in the springtime and let the rain have at it. And I just want to really attest to the fact that this really works. I have been using it for years. I put it on every spring. You can also put it on in the fall. So that would be a product. It's called, it's just corn gluten is what it is. And some of the other things that I like to use for fertilization, my vegetables and flowers, I have extensive gardens, is fish meal. So fish meal is another really good non-toxic fertilizer that you can use on your plants. So I hope this is helpful. And again, I've been doing this for years, and I have very, very good luck.
Thank you, Jennifer. We are glad to hear that you're having good luck with it, and thank you very much for sharing the insight for us. Kim, I'll ask this question for you. We have an email now in from Wendy in Bath. Wendy says she's got a newly built archway trellis and wants to plant something on it that will climb and cover it well, preferably for much of the year. It's an area full of sun. What would you recommend? Do you have any recommendations for Wendy, Kim?
Oh, that is tricky. A full sun climbing, I would have to lean into a native plant just by way of this conversation. But the one that's coming to mind is actually a little bit more for a shady space, which would be Virginia creeper. Dave, can you help me out here? A full sun climbing?
Yeah, Virginia clematis is a wonderful choice. It gets just covered in these very fragrant white blooms during the summertime, and it'll climb up that trellis and just be really glorious.
Anything that needs to happen to the trellis, maybe Wendy's already thought about this, but you have to treat the trellis in a certain way to make sure that that piece of infrastructure is there long enough to support doesn't get ruined by being covered by a plant, basically.
Oh, I don't know. Don't know too much about trellis maintenance, but any nice sturdy trellis should do. But if the trellis were to deteriorate and you replaced it, then that Virginia clematis would just climb right up that new trellis because they love to climb.
I always wonder that when I see maybe like some beautiful vines or something that are climbing up the outside of a home or something, is there damage being done to the structure? But it sounds like maybe not. Maybe I'm just worrying for no reason.
No, I think that, I think that it's possible that you have, the attachment points of the plant, could, potentially like work their way into whatever material they're climbing. But I think that, a lot of times people's fear of introducing a climbing vine into their garden or yard is a little bit overstated. Like, people are kind of like Virginia creeper, the one that Kim mentioned. People are afraid of that plant because they think, maybe it's going to strangle my tree, when there's really no strangling, that takes place. And, with these native plants, they've kind of, they have been living side by side for so long that they're at the very worst frenemies, and they know how to coexist.
I'll tell you what, they're not doing Virginia Creeper any favors with that name. That's not giving you any any good reputational cred there. Thank you very much for that. Our producer Drew says that he's got clematis in his yard and he absolutely loves it. So thank you for that. Kim, I want to ask you, do you have any favorite full sun plants?
I do. I am an absolute sucker for a common milkweed, to be completely honest with you. I love all milkweeds, common milkweed, swamp milkweed, butterfly weed, of course. I also love the coneflowers, yellow coneflower and purple coneflower. I love black-eyed Susans. Those are very prolific in our growing spaces.
How about for you, Dave? Any favorite?
Oh
Full
my
sun?
God. Yeah, I've got so many favorites. There's a really extraordinary looking native plant for full sun that a lot of folks aren't aware of, and this is called Culver's root. And it gets these flower spikes that are white, and people say that it looks like a candelabra or maybe the spires of a palace. And that seems like very grandiose language, but it lives up to it. It is quite a stunning plant and a nice centerpiece for your garden.
Catherine, how about for you? Any favorite full sun plants you'd like to shout out today?
Yes, my current favorite one is fall sunflower, Heliopsis helianthoides. I know it's a mouthful, but it's called fall sunflower. It is one of the longest blooming plants that I've ever grown. Once it starts to bloom, usually at the end of June, it goes through into the fall until the winter causes it to die back. It comes in different colors. The main basic color is a bright yellow, clear yellow. It's got probably, I'd say, 2-inch wide flowers, and it's just covered with them. And there's different heights to it. It's usually, you can count on it growing to about 3 feet tall if you have the straight native species, but there are a lot of cultivars out there now that have some different colors, and I'm trying to grow some of those as well because I just love this plant. Everywhere I've put it, as long as it gets at least 6 hours of sunlight a day, it does fantastic. And it doesn't have the issues it doesn't get powdery mildew. The deer haven't been chewing on it. It's just wonderful. So that's one of my favorites, and I agree with all the coneflower too and the milkweeds. I've got all of those, and I love all of those. And Culver's root, again, is exceptionally beautiful with its the texture of it, how it just comes up straight and true. It is a very beautiful, stunning plant. But there are too many to mention. I mean, I'm experimenting now with some ground covers too, that filling in something like wild strawberry even instead of mulch. It stays low, and it's easy to just snip off those runners. And that will grow even in shade as well. So yeah, don't get me started. I'll just talk forever on native plants.
Well, we appreciate the recommendations very much. We do have a question from Mary. Dave, I'll ask you if you can respond to this. Mary says, I trimmed my boxwoods back in September, and currently they have not greened up yet. There are spots that are still brown. Can I do something to help them?
Unfortunately, my knowledge of plants kind of stops at a dead end when we get outside of native plants. So I don't know much about the boxwood maintenance or what the appearance might indicate. So I'm sorry, but I don't know.
Kim, do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm just going to echo Dave on that one,
Okay.
unfortunately.
That's all right. And Catherine, how about you? Any ideas for Mary?
Yes, I do have ideas, but it would be helpful to have a photograph. That can be caused by a lot of different things, and mainly if it's coming off the winter, that could be just some winter damage because some boxwoods are very sensitive to freezing and unfreezing, and just ice being on there. And if it's just sporadic, the thing is you really should bring it in because there's a lot of insects that can cause that type of damage, but just because of how you described it after winter, I'm going to say it could be winter damage, or if there's any salt, where you put any salt down near these boxwoods, because salt can cause a little bit of burn. If the damage is not too bad, but it's not too severe, you should be able to trim that out of there once once your boxwoods start shooting out new growth, and you could trim it out, and they should fill it in if they're healthy.
All right, good.
But that's the best I can do without actually seeing a picture of it or seeing, looking under a microscope to see if there's anything else going on.
Okay. I want to ask Kim about something that's going on here in the area. There's a regional native seed network developing. Tell us about the work that's being done at Hold'em and what you're seeing with partner organizations.
Sure. Thank you so much for asking. I'm really excited to discuss this, and I'm really excited that this is happening in our region right now. So as mentioned before, I work at the Holden Seed Bank, which is a fully operational seed bank facility located at the Holden Arboretum in Kirtland, Ohio, and we are primarily focused on sourcing, collecting, storing, and then ultimately redistributing native seeds of Ohio provenance in our region and beyond. And I like to, and this is all in support of ecological restoration and reforestation in some capacity. And I like to think of ecological restoration and reforestation as this wheel almost, with all of these different spokes that help this wheel move. And so you have conservation organizations, you have government agencies, whether at the state, city or federal level, of course. You have nonprofit organizations, community gardeners, native plant societies. You have native nurseries like Meadows City Native Plant Nursery, so on and so forth. And there are all of these different spokes that are supporting ecological restoration. And when I think about the Holden Seed Bank, I'm really hoping that this facility can serve as a resource to support all of the really important, valuable work that all of these different organizations are doing.
Quick follow-up question for you
Sure.
before we say goodbye. Can anybody come in and get seeds from the seed bank? How does that work?
Oh, that is a great question. We are still ironing out all of those details,
Okay.
But you should definitely reach out. I'm going to say that the answer is yes, with exceptions here and there.
Okay. Well, there is a lot that we did not get to in our conversation about gardening together. I hope we can get the whole group back together in a couple months when gardens are in bloom. I want to thank our panel members for being with us today. Kim Lessman, manager at Holden Forest and Garden Seed Bank. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much.
Dave Tomaszewski, co-owner of Meadow City Native Plant Nursery. Dave, thank you.
Thanks.
And Catherine Frey, master gardener at the Ohio State University Extension in Medina County. We appreciate the time, Catherine.
Okay, you're welcome. I was glad to be here.